I had to make some notes to myself here because, you know, your names when you're trying to think back. I see I wrote up here your dad died in 61.
Yep.
Okay.
So yeah. So what do your notes say?
Well, you know, where do you want to start? Where your dad?
Well, you ran across him, right?
Yeah. Now,
But
I guess
they made a phone call or something.
to start the story, I guess you want it all.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Well, and I might be wrong on these times, but it was after supper when we got a call from Matilda that if Bill was there because he was coming to our place to get some horse medicine, and so I'm assuming the time that would be about 6:30 because that's we would eat milk and get there.
Right.
So by the time I got my clothes on and all of that, I would have gotten down there somewhere at 7 o'clock about. And so I took a lantern and a collie dog with me and went down to the pump house. You know, it took me a while to get down there. And when we got there, you know, it's kind of spooky. They would cover it with manure. That whole thing was, you know, to insulate it.
The whole pump house?
Well, damn near, yeah. It would be, you know how it come up the walls?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they put manure up to the shingles and around the whole thing. So it was just about
Just
airtight.
insulated, yeah.
Airtight. Anyway, so when the dog and I got there, I was just, you know, you kind of spooky, open the door and stuff, but didn't know. We were just told to go down there and see if Bill was there. Well, anyway, we opened the first door. I did a double door on it, and then we opened the next door, and I make sure the dog's with me, you know. And we get in there, and I put the lantern in first to see, you know, darker than heck in there. And the lantern went out. So I backed out, of course. And so I stood there a while, and I thought, oh, you know, I can't see in there. I can't hear nothing. There's nobody there. So I assumed that Bill had went home. Well, we just left, I don't know why, I'm kind of a dumb, but I left the door open because I was going to go back up to the house so my mom could call Matilda again that he wasn't there. Well, the dog and I got to the bridge, and I tell you, it was blood-shattering screams coming out from the pump house. We got just about to the bridge, and to describe the night, it was 30 below, and it was just as clear as a bell. And that snow, you just crunch, crunch, crunch.
Yeah.
You know? And this screaming, I mean, it was just like, and, well, we run like hell, you know. That's all we did, you know, and went up and said that he was there, but, you know, to get some help. Well, when we run up to ask for help, you know, in those days, I don't know, is this getting too long?
No.
They had the hand crank, you know, 1 long and 2 for short. It would be different numbers or 3 longs and a short.
Yeah.
So everybody on the party line were bored in the winter anyway, so they had been all on this hookup since Matilda called. And they were on the phone, so they were waiting for news back, you know. And when the call came back that Bill was down there, excuse me, and the roads are blocked. Now this is blocked from Daisy to your farm. There was no way of opening it. The plow couldn't make it out. There was 6-7 foot drifts all the way. And it was snowed in from Valley City to the farm, to your farm. So that's to bring it up to where we're at here with Bill still. I haven't seen him or anything.
Right.
So Vernon Olson lived down where Lausch's farm now. There was a little house down there. Do you remember that? Bob? We called
the Lausch farm is what?
Yeah, we called it Schwinger place, but Vernon lived down there. Okay. So he's on the phone. Gene Weller's on the phone where Clarence lives. Okay. And Ed Lausch is on the phone where I call it the Duff place, but Ronnie Hogan lives there.
Ronnie Hogan.
Okay. And he's on the phone. And Ole Kunze, Bernard, Keith's dad, he's on the phone. Now this is all I know from. There might have been more, I suppose, on the phone. So anyway, while I'm going back to find out, in the meantime then, Grandma Berger and George were living with your mom, or with
Grandma.
Bill, you know.
Yep.
And so George got dressed up, and I always remember him coming. It was a moonlight night, you know, and of course as things are happening, it gets pretty spooky, you know.
Yeah.
And he's coming down the hill, you know. I look like a big guy walking down that road, you know, coming.
Yeah.
Look, so anyway, when we got there, your grandpa was screaming just like you couldn't believe. He got oxygen.
Yeah, and that's why your light went
But
out.
see, he's still down in that well. You know how
Yeah.
Bob, he's sitting down there with his back up against, slid down, you couldn't see him. You know, that's why it was scary. Well, long and short of it, I wouldn't go near that place without somebody with me. Well, it's my mom and grandpa and me all was at the farm.
Yeah.
Gene got there first. Vernon come walking up the creek on the ice. Ed Lausch, he hauled his kids to school, so he had a sled with straw in and a good team. He harnesses up. They're anticipating, you know, and he heads for here. And Ole is coming, and he makes Keith. They had a W6, I suppose, International, and a snowplow on it. And he had him dig holes through the field, and by Larry Reedman's. And Keith just about pulled his ears off, but Ole stayed in the car.
Yeah.
You knew Ole.
I didn't know
Oh,
that. No, I didn't.
yeah, but anyway, he got there, but not while we're down the creek yet. So, anyway, when I get back, Gene comes, and then him and I walk down there alone together. And boy, your grandpa was a heavy man, well, of course, limp. So we tried and tried and tried to get him out of that pit. You know, what is it, 4 foot?
Yeah, down to the ledge.
Yeah, he was sitting on the floor with his feet straight out, you know, and sitting there. He was draining the pump. So finally, Gene and I get him out of that pit, and we, of course, couldn't lift him, so we got him over to the door. His head to the door. We knew he needed air, you know.
Right.
And not thinking how cold it was that night, you know, I suppose we pulled on him a little bit with his hands, and we had the door open. They dropped him out. Well, you know, your dad froze the tips of his fingers down there, so you can imagine how cold it was that night.
Yeah.
Till he got it loaded up.
Right.
We not thinking, should never lift his hands. You know, his arms were extending out in the snow or the cold.
Right.
And anyway, Ed Lowe shows up with his sleigh, and they put Bill in it, and they head up the hill. And then I go home, and I get my pony, and I ride up to Whelan's. And by that time, they had Doc Sedin on the phone. And he was telling them how to, at that time, nobody knew how to give mouth to mouth.
No.
He didn't either, I don't think. I mean, maybe he did, but. So they just said to do compressions on Bill's chest. Well, they had him on the floor, I remember in your dining room where it is now.
Yeah.
Kid, I still see that. And had him on the floor, and they were sit on him and, you know, push him, and got funny and break his ribs. But, you know, and Sedin was on the phone with one of the men, telling him to count to 3.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, he started breathing.
Gee.
But the minute they would quit this,
Compressions.
quit. So they tell Sedin says, well, it's the only way you're going to keep him alive. Well, then the next thing was, got to get him to the valley. So they called Hub Peterson. He was the old undertaker. His son took over after he left.